Hi, everybody. A very, very good evening to each one of you, and welcome to our webinar. Firstly, wishing you all a very happy financial new year. A new year, a new financial year always brings so many opportunities, fresh, opportunities, new goals, and a chance to build a stronger business, a chance to achieve higher milestones, newer milestones. And I think it is a great time to reflect, reset, and plan for a better growth ahead, and which is why we are here with our webinar today with our expert speaker, Miss Ankita. Ankita is a qualified company secretary and a cost and management accountant, and she has over a decade of professional experience. She specializes in corporate compliance, financial strategy, and regulatory advisory. Over the past 5 years, she has taken on leadership responsibility as an MSME head, and she has been helping so many MSMEs in this space. She helps them with accessing schemes, policies, and compliances. And I think, she's the best speaker that we could have for starting the new year and understanding how to build the right set of tools and how to get our compliances right and to start the new year in the right way. So I wouldn't take a lot of time, Ankita. Over to you.
Thank you, Ankita, for such a vivid description of mine. So I'll just take this webinar ahead. I'll like to narrate a small story of one of my friend Rahul, who owns a business in the name of Rahul Enterprises. You know, Rahul Enterprises is a manufacturing unit set up at Maharashtra with an annual turnover of around say 2.5 CR. Business is actually doing well, orders are coming in, and cash flow looks decent. But my friend Rahul, being a promoter of a company, is busy in managing operations and assuming that his accountant will be taking care of the compliances part. Now, what's actually happened over the years? GST returns were filed, but at the same time, proper conciliation was missing. Tax was deducted, TDS was deducted, but there was delay in deposit. He went on missing on the advance tax payment installment. And moreover, payment to his MSME vendors were also delayed beyond 45 days. So, how many of you think that this is common among MSMEs? Yes, indeed, it is common among most of my MSME friends. So as a resultant, Rahul Enterprises ended up in paying lakhs, not because his business failed, but because on being non-compliant. You know, most of the MSMEs don't fail because of the lack of the business opportunities. They struggle because of the missed compliances. So a very good afternoon to all. I'll be taking this webinar on the topic Mastering the New Financial Year 2026-2027. Let not be any compliances missed by any of my MSME friends. So taking this agenda ahead, I will be discussing on the compliances and the regulatory discipline, be it in terms of GST, income tax, TDS, ROC compliance, and with the new labor law coming in, we should not miss on the labor law compliances also. At the same time, why there is a call for financial and the documentation strength on the part of MSMEs, I'll be also taking that agenda, discussing on DPR, audit trail, and how CA certificates also matter. Taking this agenda forward, I'll be talking on digital and the process readiness in terms of ERP, e-invoicing, and MIS reporting. Funding and growth strategy being one of the favorite area of mine. I'll be talking how MSME should take care of their working capital, reinvestment, and incentives, and most importantly, 5 pillar MSME model as an integrated framework for the scalable enterprise. So when I talk about the compliance framework, the most important question, the critical foundation for every MSME unit, that is GST filings, income tax, TDS, ROC filings, labor laws, Udyam registration. These are very small parts. These, I would say, though a very negligible part, but yet at the same time very integral part of this. So when I talk about the ROC filings, many of my MSME unit miss on, the company is formed, the startup is formed in terms of paper, the incorporation certificate is in hand, but they missed on the annual compliances part. That is your annual filings. When I talk about the labor laws, many of my MSME friends are still ignorant on the fact whether on which data the PF should be recorded, ESIC data becomes the compliant, and the statutory register should be maintained. And nevertheless, Udyam registration. Ensure accuracy of your Udyam classification detail because it does important, it does matter. So now what can be the real cost of being non-compliance? You know, as a MSME, when I deal with many of my MSME friends, the real cost of non-compliance, which I feel they face, is on their subsidy rejection. Now, every state and central government has announced more or less subsidy on for every manufacturing unit. Or rather, if I talk about the new Maharashtra industrial policy, they have just subsidized not only the manufacturing unit but also the service area. But again, the question of non-compliant. If my entity is non-compliant, it disqualifies them from the government subsidy application at the very first screening stage only. So, missing on something very important just because on the cost of being non-compliant. Then again, loan delays. Bank flag compliance gaps causing loan delays, higher scrutiny, or outright rejection of the credit facilities. Now, I would not say that without going on this fact, every business needs finance for running their business, right? Now, this plays a very important role. When you approaches the bank for the funding and your funding proposal just gets delayed or just gets rejected on the being non-compliant part. Now, I should not talk on this, but penalties and litigation. When I talk about the penalties and litigation, every non-compliance, whether it is on my GST filing, which is the monthly data, whether it is on, ROC filings, my tax returns, every non-compliant avoid invites the heavy interest, late fees, and legal exposure, which is finally eroding a margin and the bandwidth significantly. It is actually eroding my working capital. And I should not miss on this also. Now we are in the era of AI based technology, where there is everywhere AI based scrutiny. Now tax authorities deploy AI based tracking system. So being non compliant can increasingly difficult to conceal. One cannot take this opportunity of being non compliant when there is a AI based scrutiny. So my insight from this will be non-compliance actually results in your direct financial loss plus missed growth opportunities. Now, as I was talking about the closed documentation gap, which many of my MSME friends misses. So to take this agenda, the first and the foremost thing which plays an important role here is DPR. That is my detailed project report. Now, maintaining an updated DPR covering your project scope, financials, and timelines are for every major initiative is now the need of an hour. Whether you go to bank, whether you go for any initial subsidy thing, whether you go for any funding thing, the most important thing or the most important document that is demanded today is your DPR. Now, investment proofs and invoices. How this plays an important role. One should retain all the capital investment invoices, purchase orders, and payment confirmations in a very organized record. This is a need of an hour. Let me just take an example to you. While we go for this subsidy application, Here the subsidy application is mainly, depending on what is your total capex. So now, if I miss on any of the invoices in terms of proving my total capital expenditure, it results in the loss of my subsidy amount. Accordingly, when any of my vendors is delaying my payment, this serves my invoices needs to be in my hand. I cannot claim on those amount in the absence of invoices. So I suggest here to all my MSME friends to maintain a proper investment proofs and invoices on records. Now, policy eligibility notes. What does it mean? Whether I talk about sitting in Maharashtra, about the Maharashtra state government policy, there are policy subsidy for tourism. There is a subsidy for manufacturing unit. Now, if I go on starting a business without taking a note of it, it will be losing on the opportunity. So one should always document the rationale for incentive eligibility with reference to specific policy clauses and condition. Need of an R, I would say. And again, your CA certificates and approval. Now, even what is the trend here that I am seeing, that even if you have a sanction letter in hand, bank sanction letter in hand, the disbursement qualifies only and only when you have a proper utilization certificate from CA on records, right? Your subsidy documentation also involves a major CA certifications. So these are some of your, close documentation gap, which over the years I have seen in many of my MSME friends. So in this financial year, let not miss on any of these documentation. Now, digital and process readiness. Why it is important? Why there is a need for a shift from manual to ERP based accounting? Now, modern MSMEs require real time visibility into financials, inventory, and compliance. A robust ERP system is no longer an optional, rather, it's a prerequisite for funding readiness and growth. So now, why it matters? Data-driven MSMEs consistently receive faster credit approvals. Now, supposedly you're approaching any bank, for loan, and there is no proper system, ERP system that you are having. Rather, you still rely on the age-old school method of your, manual invoices or manual data. Again, banking doesn't rely on this anymore. So in the pace of this MSME, which is an ERP driven, will have a faster tag than yours. So it attracts better valuation and demonstrate operational maturity to lenders and investors. So now what is ERP based accounting? Just replace your manual ledgers with integrated auditable digital records, which will be again a very good tool for you, whether you talk about in case of subsidy availment, whether you talk about in case of your credit worthiness of your company, whether you talk about your bank funding, whether you talk about your subsidy enhancement, and moreover, whether you talk about your delayed payment cases. Now, GST and compliance integration. It not only limits yourself to your, just accounting thing, it also enhances your GST and compliance integration. It auto reconcile your returns irrespective and thus the human errors in filings, right? And MIS reporting. It generates management reports for faster and data driven decision. So now again, this will be a real-time tracking in terms of your inventory, debtors, and cash flow at a glance. Then audit-ready records. It minimizes risk during tax and statutory audit. So if you are a MSME, which is still holding to your manual ERP, it's a time in this financial year that you should shift from manual to ERP-based accounting. Now, e-invoicing and the cash transaction discipline, a very important thing. Now, whom it is applicable? So, for a turnover of around 5 CR, greater than or equal to turnover of around 5 CR, All B2B transactions must be reported to the invoice registration portal in real time. E-invoicing eliminates GST mismatches. It ensures seamless ITC flow and signals compliance maturity to lenders. And again, if my turnover is greater than or equal to 10 CR, it qualifies for relief. It promotes digital transactions across all operation, maintain audit-ready records to substantiate the threshold compliance at any point. Now, IRP compliances is mandatory real-time B2B invoice registration. So it again seamless ITC. It reduces your input tax credit disputes and delays. Cash receipts must be less than or equal to 5% of your total receipts. And at the same time, your cash payment also must be or less than equal to 5% of your total payments. So what is can be the key takeaway from this? It's like lower cash is equal to lower compliance burden plus higher transparency. Now let me give you one example why e-invoicing and cash transaction discipline is important today. One of my MSME friends just approached me because there was one vendor of him which was not paying him, in spite of so many reminders, so many emails, so many notices sent to him. The only reply which he was getting in return, yes, we'll do it. Yes, we'll do it. But was he able to move this case in court? No, because he was still following that, manual e-invoicing wala criteria. There was no proper record, transaction record to prove his transaction. So in spite of, government giving you this leverage opportunity, you're being a MSME, you can file your payment under delayed payment cases and fast track your case just because I was not following on this e-invoicing thing and this cash transaction discipline. I missed on that opportunity. So very important for this financial year for all of my MSME units that they should go on for e-invoicing and cash transaction discipline. Now, this is something which is like very close to me. Funding and profit reinvestment strategy, where I feel many of my MSME friends, lack. As in how? So it is very important for a MSME to identify their working capital gaps. Now map cash conversion cycles and seasonal funding needs proactively, right? See, many of us just do go on running business. We get a PO, we purchase, we get a PO, and accordingly we place our orders and supplies has been made. But what about the cash crunch? What about that working capital gap? Because my PO was, silent on the fact that what will be going to be my payment terms, right? What is going to be my credit cycle? So even though I have a running business, even though I have a POs on record, and even though I have supplied the material on timely basis, I can still face this, right? So it is very important to identify the working capital gaps for every MSME units. Now, the second and the most important is reinvest your surplus strategically. Now many of my MSME friends always loses this opportunity, they always lack on this, how to channelize their profit into capacity expansion, into technology upgradation or market development, right? So this is like most important that during this financial year MSME should take care as in how they should they reinvest surplus amounts strategically. Accordingly, one should apply for CC and OD limits. One should maintain structured credit line before any urgency arises, avoiding distress borrowing, right? So again, this if all these three is taken care, it will be reducing my external debt dependency. So build internal accruals to lower interest burden and improve net worth. Avoid fund diversion. Use credit strictly for its sanctioned purpose to protect banking relationship. Now, many of you will agree that we have a sanction letter in hand, right? And my sanction letter reads as that this loan has been granted to me for the purchase of this particular machinery. Now, as the disbursement happen, I lose the purpose of that sanction. Accordingly, the cash crunch is there. My unit is facing the limit of working capital, and I deploy, I diverse those funds, which should be avoided by my MSME friends. At the same time, improve the valuation. This reinvestment signals financial discipline and boost long-term enterprise value, right? As an investor, nobody would like to invest in a company which is a debt driven, right? Rather, one would like to invest in a company which is redeploying their profits, which is reinvesting their surplus strategically. Now, what is this incentive awareness or five pillar model? So, when I talk about, let me take you through this bottom as in compliance clean. What does being compliance clean mean? That is, all my filings are done on time, be it ROC filing, right, which is annual compliance, be it my GST filings, filing of my R1 and 3B, which is at the same time monthly and for some units quarterly also, right? Again, whether my company is funding ready, whether it is a structured credit, disciplined records are maintained, at the same time I'm not missing on any of the thing, then incentive is optimized, that is proactive policy mapping. Now what happens, many of us have an idea to open a unit, to have a manufacturing unit, ignorance of the fact that yes, this unit can be subsidized also. Supposedly, I'm going to start a business. I have a plan, I have a strategy to start a manufacturing unit in a locality around Pune. I have prior orders also. But I have not taken care whether taking a land, since I'm starting all from the scratch, whether taking a land in this area of will be beneficial, or rather a 5 kilometers is making a difference to me. Yes, it does makes a difference, because as in subsidy how it matters. Sitting in Maharashtra, I would just like to explain how subsidy matters here in Maharashtra. It depends on the taluka, right? The greater or the more developed the area is, your subsidy quantum is like less, and the less developed the area is, your subsidy quantum is high. But again, that doesn't mean just in terms of being, oh, okay, here we are getting a subsidy, one should run a business there. No, that is not a thing. But again, one should strategize the decision, keeping all these things in mind. Accordingly, there is a subsidy for women entrepreneurs. Now, accordingly, if I am a woman entrepreneur wherein my 100% ownership is in the hands of women, but I'm missing on the subsidy. So again, this is, a lack which I need to identify and work accordingly. And if I go on talking on this incentive thing, there are incentives for your tourism policy. So supposedly you are a tourism, you have a plan to open a hotel or a motel kind of a thing, and you are not aware on this subsidy thing. Again, you are missing. So subsidy is something which again helps the MSMEs to run their business more efficiently. You can always have a backup plan of that thing, because subsidy here is given for your running condition. It is not anything is given for the upfront, right? It is not a loan wala thing. It is for your running condition. So when you are in a running condition, you can always replow back there that thing accordingly. Now, risk control. when any unit is compliant on their part, right? If I am paying all my dues on time, that is, if I am paying all my MSME vendors on time, don't you think it creates a credit worthiness of my unit? If I am ROC compliant. Many times, what I have seen, supposedly a person come in, a unit come in for advisory thing that, Ankita, I'm going to start this business. I have this business plan since I'm already into this packaging thing, corrugated boxes and all. So I have a plan to take this business into expansion mode. So I suggest, yes, very good idea. Why not? You should go ahead. In this expansion thing, also, you can get a subsidy also. So when a person hear about this, subsidy thing, it creates a butterfly. Okay, subsidy is there. Yes, subsidy is there. So what do I need to do? So, sir, if you are planning to open a business in this area, my advice will it be, why don't you create a new company and give the ownership in the hands of women? So if your company is like 100% ownership of woman entrepreneur, so you will be qualifying for an additional subsidy there. The unit, my MSME friend gets, very excited and they are like, yes, why not? And they go on with a very scratch thing that they open a company. They float a new company, either in terms of LLP or in terms of a private limited company. But they are ignorant of the fact that once you open a company, in the ROC registered हो गया, MCA registered हो गया, फिर वो LLP हो या आपका प्राइवेट लिमिटेड कंपनी हो, it comes with the cost of annual compliances also. So just not taking care of that one thing that I'll be able to get or I'll be eligible for that subsidy, one should also be counter ready for the another part, that you need to maintain the ROC filings, annual ROC filings. If I go on talking on this, there are many companies which are just formed, but they are not compliant, which is creating a huge penalty cost. So even if my MSME friends, business is really taking good, I have orders in my hand, but what if my working capital is drained by paying the penalties? And yes, it does happen. It does happen. There are many partnership firms who are just registered in the terms of stamp paper. They are not even fulfilling the criteria of ROF compliance, registrar of firm compliance, which is not a mere registration under ROF, which takes only a half an hour to 1 hour time of yours. But my MSME friends are missing on it. These are very eligible part, I would say, a very insignificant part. But when I talk in terms of your growth, when I talk in terms of your funding, when I talk in terms of your collaboration, these things does matter. Now when you have foreign vendors, when you have export coming in hands, right, and you're still in the sole proprietorship form of business, I don't say that sole proprietorship form of business is not a right choice of a business, but again, it doesn't create a good credit worthiness, right, in terms of your exporters. So they are looking if your company is a private limited company. So now again this theory arises, many of them gets into this कि नहीं हमको तो ये sole proprietorship को convert करना है private limited में. But again, jumping on any decision or concluding on any discussion, one should always be also be not ignorant on the fact that what are the compliances that they should need to take care of. Now many of friends come with an idea. Now there has been lot of this employer employee wala thing. Now I need to start something of my own. This is how our MSME units get started. I need to start something of my own. So how to get started? And the very first thing and the very blunder thing that they do, in spite of any ideation stage, in spite of missing on that ideation and readiness wala stage, they take the GST registration in hand. and they are unaware of the fact that if I have my GST registration in hand, I also need to comply with the monthly compliances of this. I need to file my GSTR 1. I need to file my GSTR 3B, right? So nothing, even though you don't have any sales on record, right? Even though you have a nil transaction, once you have taken that registration on record, you need to file these returns on time. Otherwise, what happens? It attracts a notices in your name. So before any business could start, before any business could flourish, the first thing that the business notices is notice in their hand. So this is something which I would say that one should always be compliance clean. All statutory filings should be at their current, right? Now, risk controlled, as I was talking on this topic, key related party documentation, exposure is managed once you are compliant, and growth, structured expansion, and reinvestment planned. So, when I talk about this growth, structured expansion, how any unit works, supposedly, how any unit works. Supposedly, I have started a business. To start a business, I had taken a loan. Everything is going in hand. It goes well. But what about my operational cost, right? How one can like get a master on this? Because operation cost is something which you will be facing every now and then. To run a business efficiently and effectively, one needs to maintain a proper working capital in hand. Every now and then, I cannot approach my bankers for the same, right? So this plays a very important role, being compliant, because if I am being compliant, everything takes in place. So I would also like to say that, almost 20 to 40% of the project cost can be attained through right planning. Now, how? Like state industrial policies I was talking about. Now, every state has some or the other industrial policy. Since sitting in Maharashtra, I would highlight here Maharashtra is currently having the industrial policy 2025 in place, and we are currently working on the policy 2019 policy, where every manufacturing unit is subsidized. If you are in the thirst area like food processing, bioenergy, you get an additional subsidy for 20%. If you are a woman entrepreneur, you get an additional subsidy. So again, when you start a business in this financial year, when you are going to take a fly in this financial year, one should always take a note of this. Now, when I talk about this interest subsidy, now again, if my MSME unit qualifies for these under this state industrial policy, I can also avail the interest subsidy. It sounds good, right? I'm taking a loan from bank is charging me interest on it, and again that interest is also subsidized by my government, right? So again, an opportunity, working capital opportunity that can be gained here. Now, stamp duty exemption is also there. Supposedly, you're going to avail any loan wherein a stamp duty is charged, or again, whether you are in terms of buying any new land wherein you need to pay a hefty amount as a stamp duty, that also gets exempted under this policy. So I'm not saying that the state industrial policy is only restricted in the state of Maharashtra. Whether you are in any state of India, be it Bihar, be it UP, be it Odisha, every state has their own state industrial policy. And again, we have also some of the central policies, government policies that are in line. So in this financial year, I would say that apart from being compliant on all the necessary compliance of ROC, and one should always be ready with this thing also. Now, what is the practical advisory that I would like to give from my experience? I treat compliance as an entry ticket for all my MSME friends. You know, It should not be treated as a cost. Compliance is never a cost. Trust me on this. But being a non-compliant is always a cost. Yes, it is always a cost. So one should decide one should be being compliant or being non-compliant. It is the entry requirements for every funding scheme, subsidy, and yes, nevertheless, incentive program available. Um, just to put an example, I would say I was having a file, which was qualifying in terms of every area. When I talk about, okay, you're a woman entrepreneur. Yes. So you qualify for subsidy. Oh, you're a manufacturing unit. That too in food processing. Okay. Additional 20% subsidy for you. But what was missing? The paperwork was missing. There was no state Maharashtra Pollution Control Board, MPCB, which every state pollution control board needs to have from unit needs to have if they are starting a new business, right? Again, the very thing, LLP was formed, but there was no annual compliances that was taken care of. पार्टनरशिप फर्म था 2007 से रजिस्टर्ड है बट अगेन आरओएफ में अभी तक उसका चालान भरा ही नहीं है. So these are like some of my compliance part which is restricting my entry for any of my subsidy program, for any of my funding scheme. So never treat compliance as a cost. But if you are non-compliant, it is certainly a cost for you. I always say to all my MSME friends or to all, I always advise on it. Structure before you borrow. It goes with the saying, plan your work and work your plan. Yes. Don't take a loan first. The very first thing which comes in MSME unit, और ये बिजनेस स्टार्ट करना है तो मेरे को लगता है कि इतना तो बैंक से मुझे लोन मिल ही जाएगा, ये इतना सब्सिडी तो मिल ही जाएगा, इतना फंडिंग तो हो ही जाएगा. नो, दिस अप्रोच इज नॉट राइट. One should always structure your financials. One should always structure your documentation and business model. Most important, your business model. Because the very first thing when you approach any borrower, they would ask for your DPR, detailed project report. This is what they are mentioning you as a business model, right? Then only if you are ready with all these things, then only you should approach your lenders with confidence. You know what went wrong here? There was a MSME unit which was going to expand their current business. Okay. So when they were going to expand their current business, now they are starting expansion in the new name. Their existing business is nowhere in the picture. It is in the name of a new business and new promoters also. This business they started in the name of their spouse, wife, right? So what happens? These wives were not having any net worth certificate or any financial background or any prior this background. So they approaches bank because they are very reluctant on this thing that since they are into business from now, since they are into business from long, nobody can stop them from, getting these funds from bank. So they are approaching the bank. But what will bank see? Bank is not going to see the credit worthiness of your husband, right? Bank is going to see the credit worthiness of these promoters. Bank is going to read the credit worthiness of this new business, not your old business, because this is clearly a new entity. Now, when you start approaching the bank before any prior planning, you end up losing your confidence because you don't hear no at once. You go on hearing no from the multiple financial institutions. And what does it getting you into it? It is draining your energy, right? It is draining your ideation. So one should always structure before you borrow. Now, the most important, which I always suggest to all my clients, is check incentives before you invest. But again, that doesn't mean that only check on incentives and then only invest. No, but it adds as a cherry on the cake. one should always be ready with their incentive wala checklist also. Don't invest in plant and machinery before mapping applicable subsidies. Yes, very correct. Because any new investment, there is a subsidy for you. Being the present government which believes in made in India wala scheme, so now everything you talk about, whether you talk about taking a loan from bank, whether you talk about any new investment in terms of land, in terms of and any state, यूपी में बैठे हैं या यहाँ बैठे हैं, हर जगह वो सब्सिडी इंसेंटिव यू शुड ऑलवेज चेक बिफोर यू इन्वेस्ट. दिस इज व्हाट आई एडवाइस टू ऑल माय क्लाइंट्स, right? Because timing and location decisions directly affect incentive eligibility. Now sitting here, if I say UP government is giving you subsidy if you are opening a logistic park, okay, so now that subsidy is not only on the logistic park but it is also on the land. So from the first investment you're making in, everything is subsidized. So I feel one should always check on the incentives before they are going to invest. Now plan expansion strategically. Now, again, as I said, expansion cannot go on just random. Just because my business is doing good, I'm having a decent profit, I should expand in this business, right? One should always expand in terms by evaluating the location, policy, environment, and available incentives before committing capital to growth. Most important, I would say very important. Supposedly, if I am planning to expand and I'm already into the food processing, and if this food processing industry is highly subsidized, be it from the state government or be it from the central government, I should always be particular on the food that I am going to. If sitting in Konkan region, I would say that I should, in food processing, I should always be having, preference over jackfruit, preference over mango, preference over cashews. So these are something which one should always plan their expansion strategically. So Ankita, do we have any questions from anyone?
Hi, Ankita. One of our viewers is asking what exactly is fund diversion?
What is?
Fund diversion. What do you mean by fund diversion?
Okay, supposedly fund diversion, what I meant here was कि I have a profit, ठीक है? So instead of taking that fund, withdrawing it as my proprietor's capital, I should always try to reinvest, rediverse those funds again in the profit. Sorry, again in my business. So it will be taking a good note of it, instead of creating a new debt thing, new borrowing thing, if I am redeploying my profit, diversing that fund in the proper way.
Got it. Got it. Understood. Okay. And well, the same viewer has asked one more question. I have surplus. Please give me ideas for strategic investments.
I have surplus. Please give me ideas for strategic
For
investment. Is this the
yes.
question is?
Yes.
Okay, so
So
supposedly that
ideas to invest the surplus, basically.
okay, so supposedly if you're already into a business and you are thinking of expansion, so you should always try to put in those surplus funds here. One of my, I would just like to brief for you on this question. One of my friend, MSME unit, was really doing good. They were into, manufacturing of this motor shutter doors for metros and all, and they were always also in the receipt of this state subsidy, government subsidy. But trust me on this, Ankita, the way they had designed their this subsidy amount, I see many people here who have not planned about the subsidy amount, because this subsidy amount is something which is like a cherry on the cake, right? This
Right.
is nothing which you have planned for. Government is helping you, but many of them uses this subsidy amount as in their own personal expenditure. For example,
Right.
a promoter, mixes their professional and their personal expenditure through this subsidy amount by buying a lavish car for them. But at the same time, when I talk about this unit, what they were doing, they were, planning. So
Hmm.
supposedly, if my this subsidy amount for the financial year 24-25, I am able receiving in this period, that is April 2026, what should be my strategy to use it? As in which area of my business I should deploy in. So this is something called strategic investment. This is
Got
something
it.
where I would say that this surplus or ideation work. Yes.
Got it. Got it. Okay. We have one more question. Where should I focus on compliance or growth?
See, it goes hand in hand. You
Hmm.
should, one cannot say that, I am growth ready. मेरे पास business के orders है, मेरे पास इतने सारे POs है, but what if you're missing on the compliance part? It is, making a curry and asking what should be like, I should be more focused on taste,
Right.
right? Taste in terms of salt or spicy, right?
Hmm.
Because
Should be
salt
balanced.
sometimes adds as a very very insignificant part, if you talk in terms of cost wise, है ना? वो बोलते हैं ना, अरे
Hmm.
मैंने ये मसाला डाला, ये spices डाला, still my veggies curry is not tasty. Why? Because it is because of the salt,
Salt.
though very
Right.
negligible in cost but very significant part. So same goes with the compliance. It is a very
Correct.
significant part, very
So I
significant.
think so. Growth is incomplete without compliance, right?
Yes, yes, they goes hand in hand. I would not say that they're substitute for each other. They are complementary product for each other. You
Correct.
cannot,
Absolutely.
right. So it's like that.
Absolutely. Okay. So yes, I think that's it for the questions. If anybody has any more questions, you can drop them in the chat below, and we'll get back to you with the answers. Now, just to end this, Ankita, I would really like to thank you so much for this session. It was very insightful and a great start to the financial year. I think one thing, that one line that you said that stayed with me is, plan your work and then work your plan. So that is
Yes.
really such a good way to look at it, to structure, before borrowing and to have our compliances in place. I think, really great insights. And thanks a lot to all our audience. Thank you for being a part of this session. And as we begin this new financial year, I would encourage all of you to stay compliant, stay informed, and most importantly, proactive in your approach. Like, our expert has told us that compliance comes before growth and it goes hand in hand. So, yeah, wishing you all a successful and growth filled year ahead. Now, if I want to talk something about Iris Peridot, it's an app that we have built for MSMEs, like you all. We are trying to empower MSMEs with the right set of tools that you can use to build your business. We have access to experts like Ankita. We have access to finance. We have RBI registered lending partners onboarded with us, and we provide collateral free loans via these lenders. The process is completely transparent, digital, and easy. Also, we have something called as registration hub. So if you are looking to start your own small business, your own MSME, or looking to grow 10x, please feel free to check that space out. I think you can download our Iris Peridot app and you will find a lot of value. And also a shout out to MSME Care. I think Ankita would want to speak a little more about that.
Yes. So MSME Care also works with the same vision. If any of my MSME friend, misses on any of the opportunities, any of the incentives, or any of the know-how, as in how to leverage on any of the government available incentives, subsidies, government schemes. So MSME Care is there to take care of these MSME units.
Great, great,
Yes.
great. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks, Ankita, once again. Have a great, great day ahead. Good evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Ankita.